Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here on the grade of the former Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and later Canadian National Railway's Graham subdivision. We are kind of in a little bit of the middle of nowhere. So we are kind of in between the two little small communities of Finnmark and Raith, Ontario, which is to the northwest of the city of Thunder Bay. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be picking up right where we left off on a previous hike that we did last week, and so we're going to be working our way 5¼ miles to the north, closer towards where Raith is, and we're going to be going towards a road access called Michener Perry Road. We've been through here a number of times. Basically, when we did the hike last week, we actually had to drive in right to here to cut down the distance on that hike. And so I've been down this section of road this year at least 3 times, and then this bike this morning would make 4. So we've seen quite a bit of the area. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our history lesson. We are going to mention something because we do have a feature that we're kind of looking for. We haven't seen it, but we'll mention it. You can see the Canadian Pacific line beside us, the Canadian Pacific Kansas City. That is their Kaministiquia subdivision, which runs from Thunder Bay to Ignace, 147 miles. So let's talk a little bit about this line. We're going to be getting into a rock cut momentarily here, so we'll talk as we go through the rock cut. So this line was constructed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway between 1905 and 1908. It was going to be an attempt by the Grand Trunk Company, which was one of the oldest railway companies in Canada, dating back to the 1850s. So you can see the start of the rock work here. Lots of rock work further down. The first little section of this hike is quiet, and then it kind of picks up. So again, it was going to be an attempt by the Grand Trunk Company to build a second transcontinental railway across Canada. Now, this was not a main part of the railway line. This was actually going to be a branch, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So here we're getting into the main part of the rock work. Not particularly high, maybe 8 feet, 9 feet at the most. We're going to be doing this a lot. We're going to be kind of curving to the right. We're kind of running, what direction are we running? We're almost running due north here, and so we're going to be curving a lot to the to the east. So here, what's neat is we haven't seen a lot of this before, but you can actually see the drill marks from the drill as they drilled into the rock cut. So you can see one here, one here. You can see they continue up. You can see a couple up there as well. So that's kind of neat to see. So again, lots of rock work. We're kind of curving around a ridge and sort of kind of running to the east a bit at times. So you can see the height of the cut here. We're probably in the 12-foot range, maybe a little bit more. And again, we're going to see way more rock work as we work our way to the west towards Raith. Okay, so let's continue our story. So we're on the lookout right here. Sorry, there's too many things going on here. We're on the lookout here for a water tank. There was a water tank that was supposed to be here around 1908 that was put in here, and it's not here in 1915. We'll talk a little bit more about it once we finish our history lesson. So again, this was an attempt by the Grand Trunk Company to build a second transcontinental railway across Canada. Now, they weren't particularly keen on doing this because of, obviously, the effort that would have been involved and the extreme cost as well. You know, given the what the Canadian Pacific went through when they built their line. So there was a lot of back and forth for quite a number of years between the company, and they were trying to get some help or trying to work with the Canadian government, and it just went back and forth for quite a while, until finally they came up with an agreement. So the plan is that the Grand Trunk Company would build the western portion of this transcontinental line, everything from Winnipeg to the west coast at Prince Rupert under the name Grand Trunk Pacific, and the government would build everything from Winnipeg to the east to New Brunswick under the name National Transcontinental. Now, this line was a bit of an anomaly because it was going to connect with the eastern portion of the line. So it was a Grand Trunk Pacific line, but it was actually going to connect with the NTR at a place called Superior Junction, which is today just east of the community of Sioux Lookout. And again, that name, Superior Junction, and the name of this line, which was the Lake Superior branch, or the Lake Superior division, indicated its purpose, which was basically to allow the line access to Lake Superior to aid in the shipment of goods, particularly grain. So again, construction began in 1905 and was completed in 1908. Now, a few years later, the whole network was constructed, but eventually what happened was that a problem arose, because the plan was, again, the Grand Trunk Pacific was going to operate their portion and as well as the government built portion. Well, when the time came, they basically backed out of the agreement because they were concerned about the costs, and they had all kinds of issues themselves building their section of the railway line. So basically they backed out. So now the Canadian government's got a problem. They have a railway line that nobody's going to operate. So again, somewhere in this, it had to be somewhere here, because like you need a water source for this water tank. And like this is the only real water source, because basically it's somewhere, the mileage shows it's somewhere in this area here. And there's a rock cut there, and we just came through a rock cut. So it's got to be somewhere along here, maybe just on the other side of the rock cut. I don't know. We'll flash you up that timetable so you can see it. Okay, so what happened was the Canadian government created their own railway company to operate the NTR. It became known as the Canadian Government Railways. Now again, remember, this line is a Grand Trunk Pacific line, but it connected to the NTR. So what happened was the Canadian government leased this line from the Canadian Government Railways leased this line from Grand Trunk Pacific. So we're passing through yet another rock cut here. A couple quick little rock cuts, and then we don't see some for a bit. So here it's pretty low, probably in the about 4 foot range, and then it all of a sudden jumps up. And so you can see here we're probably over 10 feet here. And again, so it just gives you an idea of the massive amount of work to build this line. We just came through a huge rock cut, and then basically we have to get into this rock work. And so you can see here it basically continues on, and we get even higher up here. We're probably at least in the 15-foot range, if not higher. Here it's been very dry this fall. So it is the 27th of October. We're right at the end of October, right kind of at the end of hiking season, because the weather might turn on us very quickly. But in September, we had like 6 millimeters of rain. This month, we've had about 35, which again is still below the average. And you could see normally these areas would be completely flooded. The rock cuts typically don't have very good drainage. This railway line, as you're going to hear about momentarily, has been abandoned for 30 years. So and not a lot of great maintenance is being done on here. So again, you can basically see the height of the rock cut. Okay, so again, keeping up fairly high, at least in the 15-foot range, if not higher. So again, the government created the Canadian Government Railways to operate the NTR. So what they did was they leased this line from Grand Trunk Pacific, because it did connect to the Canadian Government Railways network. So originally the name of this line, as we had indicated, was the Lake Superior branch, or the Lake Superior division of Grand Trunk Pacific. And then it became, so the rock work continues here, so it became the Fort William and Raith subdivisions of Canadian Government Railways, and that happened July of 1950. And so it continued as such until late 1918, when the Canadian Government Railways was merged, amalgamated with another bankrupt line. The Canadian Government Railways was included the NTR, but some other bankrupt lines. And so the Canadian Government Railways was merged with Canadian Northern Railway. and that merger produced Canadian National Railway. So in January of 1919, the name of this line changed yet again. It became the Fort William and Raith subdivisions of Canadian National Railway. So again, there's nowhere here because the rock cut ends where that water tank could have been. So no idea. And then later that year in October, the name of the line changed yet again. It became the Lake Superior subdivision of Canadian National Railways. After that time, Canadian National began sort of looking at its network in the area, and they realized they had some redundancies. And one of the big ones was that you basically, for 30 miles outside of the modern city of Thunder Bay, essentially you had two railway lines. You had the Canadian Northern and you had the former Grand Trunk line paralleling each other for the most part, or going kind of in the same direction for 30 miles. So what they decided to do was they were going to consolidate those lines. So in 1922, the name of this line changed again. It became the Graham subdivision. And shortly thereafter, Canadian National began construction on a bridge at a place that would eventually be called Comrie Junction. And so the plan was to double the former Canadian Northern line, which had become the Kashibawi subdivision, to Comrie Junction, and basically split the lines there. The Kashibawi subdivision would continue west towards Atikokan, and then the new line would continue across the Matawan River on a bridge and hook up with this line. And so in 1924, the name of the lines changed again. So it was split into two subdivisions, the Crest and the Graham. And they began operating the new sort of line. And then in 1925, the name was changed again. It was split into three: the Crest, the Raith, and the Quorn. And in the spring of 1925, the Crest subdivision was abandoned. So that sort of 30 miles or 28 miles eastward back into Thunder Bay. And so this line continued as the Raith and Quorn subdivisions until 1931, when it reverted back to being called the Graham subdivision, and continued to operate until 1994, when it was abandoned and the rails were pulled up shortly thereafter. And then this line was owned or leased by a forest products company until 2018, when it was bought by an American forest management company called Wagner. And so you do need a permit to go on this railway grade. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hold up here. We're going to do a battery change, and then we're going to continue our journey to the west.